Cheers, guys. Epix911, welcome to the Elitist Geek and VR news for July 21st. So just before I get started, I'd hope to have a lot more content up, specifically the games which many of you have hammered me on. Yes, you guys know who you are. It's about 6 core titles. I want to work on those first. This last week I had a server emergency. SharePoint server went down. Real bugger to get back up. So I've been putting in crazy hours, which is funny because a few of you commented on how I managed to have the time to play, do videos, and work if I'm truly in IT. Well, I work specific hours, and you can call it clock punching. I'll come to work early, but I leave early. So a typical day, 7, leave 2:30 to 3. That's kind of my hours, because when shit hits the fan, plus every Sunday I do server maintenance and I do that remotely, spend hours doing that. When shit hits the fan, IT people put in a lot of overtime. And unlike the accountants who work overtime and get the attaboys and attagirls, there's usually no accolades for IT. But I'm used to it, and those of us in IT have gotten used to it, but you rarely hear good job. You're just expected to have servers up and running all the time. Of course, that should be a natural expectation, right? But once in a while, anyways, where it kills is time on a week like this when shit does hit the fan. So count on me getting those games specifically up next before other stuff. I know that wasn't the case with raw data, but hey, I had to try it, and hey, I can't help it, blew my mind, right? First story that I'm going to talk about has to do with Stan Lee. There's going to be a VR hangout with Stan where, he basically discusses his latest project, which is called Cosmic Crusaders. Excuse me. And Cosmic Crusaders is a kind of a superhero initiative thing. But where I want to start with Stan Lee is, if you don't know who Stan Lee is, holy crap, shame on you. I was going to say maybe if you were in an English-speaking country, but no, you would still probably have heard of him because the superheroes for Marvel that he either created directly, helped others create, are so mainstream, popular, and ingrained in the public consciousness that they may not recognize him, but they'll know his accomplishments, right? Which is a shame because, again, he's 93 years old. If you've seen him, and he still attends Comic Cons, he is active, I would say sprightly, animated. All his mental faculties are sharp as ever. If that's the quality of life I could have, hell, in my 70s, never mind 90s, and still be able to game, that would be freaking awesome. But unfortunately, he's indicated this is probably going to be his last Comic Con. So, like me, if you grew up with him reading Marvel Comics, you know the phrase Excesior, then maybe hang out, check it out, or cheers a beer in his honor, right? Cheers, Stan. The next thing I want to talk about is HTC partnering with HP to create bundled Vive solutions. And this is no different than what Oculus Rift has done with Asus, Alienware, Dell, similar to that, right? If you've got a lot of income and you're lazy or don't want to know how to build a PC, which is your right, you can buy the bundle, right? But just know, and I got to stress this again, that when you purchase an HP or you purchase a Dell or an Alienware, the brand may indicate quality of specific things, maybe the aesthetics, the design sense, right? But don't be fooled. There are no parts that they use that you couldn't yourself get off the shelf and put your own sticker on it, a picture of yourself on your tower, right? Because you built it. It's all they do. There are only 2 GPUs shared between all the current consoles. and PCs, and that's basically NVIDIA or AMD for gaming. Yeah, I know, before you come out of the woodwork, Intel can do pretty decent gaming for 2D, but they're nowhere near where they need to be for 3D, let alone VR, right? So you're dealing with either AMD or NVIDIA. You can get all those cards off the shelf. There used to be a time HP used pretty much exclusively, they made their own motherboards, proprietary ones that they had made for them, specifically so that they could use proprietary connections and make people have to go through them, right? That's becoming increasingly rare. You're buying game PCs that literally every single component in there you could buy off the shelf for probably cheaper. So if they still appeal to you after you've checked it out, I'll have the link below. By all means, grab it. But where I would express additional caution is the cost, right? If that entire bundle offers you a discount, absolutely, it's worth it. But if you're paying a premium just because it has a name on it and you're paying the same or more, I wouldn't. That would be my recommendation. But like I said, if it's something you're just not comfortable or don't want to do, by all means, you grab a bundled solution. And the nice thing about that is you're not tinkering, right? I know in some kind of masochistic way, I almost like all the tinkering when shit goes wrong. I really don't, but you can kind of fool yourself to think that, right? Now, the next one ties in with what I was talking about initially with regards to Stan Lee and streaming. There is a technology, and this was UploadVR that came out with it. And the company is called Pixvana, and they're working on foveated rendering. And I know that's a fancy term. Many of you may know what that is, but for those of you who do not, think of it this way. It's basically, in a nutshell, it achieves what that raw data setting that I showed you guys in the raw data video, if you've seen that, where in the game, it's the most primitive form of that type of rendering, right? There's basically an inner circle in the game that everything looks at your high resolution, right? So it's 1080p, say, in this circle. Anything outside the circle on the rest of the screen to the four corners or circle of the lens for VR units is rendered at a lower rate, right? And lower quality. The eye tracking I talked about in the other day's video takes that concept one step further, and that circle is moving around with your eye on the screen. This technique basically does that, and what they're working on is the exact same thing. Wherever you look, that's where it renders the sharpest, and everything on your peripheral is rendered lower. They've got a video on the link that I'll include that completely exaggerates, the pixelation in the perimeter area, but it's done to highlight where it's happening, right? And how frequently it kind of happens, depending on where you look. So check it out. It's kind of cool. The best thing about that article, though, is the fact that those are all methods that are going to make VR games better for us in the future, right? There's variables that we control. GPU, we just talked about that. CPU, memory, right? Those are all things that you can bring into the equation to get the most out of VR. Where we have no input is the third major component to improving performance, and that's optimized game code. You can have the best hardware, and I've seen it time and time again, and you guys know there's games that have been like this that play like poop because they're bloated, unoptimized pieces of poop, right? Crap. Now, if you look at it from the console point of view, because PC makers sometimes they can get away with stuff like that only because it's such a consistent platform, but it has, well, not consistent, the opposite is what I was going to say. There's so many variable development tools that programmers can use one of 15 different SDK bundles, different engines, right? All those different things. There's so many more variables in PC gaming that, yeah, I can kind of see where they might get a little lazy. But with consoles, you'll always notice that the games that come out in the first year, kind of launch up until about year 2, they almost always look more primitive than the games that come out the last couple years of a console's lifespan. Take the PS2, for example. We're talking about the games that came out when the PS3 was already, PS3, yeah, was already on the horizon. Persona, Final Fantasy 12. These are gorgeous games that look a lot better than stuff that came out in the beginning because programmers working with a specific tool set learned how to get the most out of the PlayStation 2, right? They refined techniques that they experimented in year 1, refined them more on their next game in year 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. That by the time you get to the end of the console's lifespan, no other variables have changed. The CPU and GPU inside that PS2, they never got more powerful. They stayed the exact same speed. The programmers got better, and they better optimize their code. And VR is going to be no different. That's why I get excited about stuff like this rendering technique. I've done currently what I can do to control the overall equation of how VR runs for me. Now I want the programmers to do their bit, right? But it's going to take a while. As they gain experience with VR, we're going to see that get better. Yes, even on the PC side of things, because these types of techniques save a lot of horsepower and really improve frame rate. The next thing I wanted to talk about has to do with VR travel apps, and it's from Wearable, the website Wearable. And just like we talked about 3 variables for power, or for making games perform better, GPU, CPU, optimized code, the same is required on the marketing level. And what I mean by that is, look at the Wii. When the Wii came out, it sold a shit ton of Wii consoles. Why? Because every Dick, Tom, Harry, cousin, aunt, grandma, grandpa, great-granny, they all tried it as a family. They played the Wii Sports and the Wii games, and it was a novelty thing. It was this social thing that families could do. The hardcore gamers stayed on, but they only represented, near the end of the Wii's lifespan there, a small percentage of the overall people who had a Wii. So the end result was games were selling abysmally. You compared them to the Xbox, PlayStation 3, the Wii games did not sell as much. Yes, there were exception titles, always exception titles, but there were a hell of a lot of average games that just sold, and good games that just sold poorly. So with VR tourism, it's another avenue to get people to buy into VR, right? And unlike the novelty wearing off for grandma and grandpa, because they're just not gamers at heart, right? If grandpa and grandma love traveling, but maybe grandpa has a bad hip and they can't travel as much, right? VR tourism would be perfect for them. They can check out museums in Europe. Of course, it doesn't beat, being there. Museums in Asia, Ayers Rock in Australia. And if I butchered that, Aussie people watching, I apologize in advance, but you get hopefully the gist of what I'm talking about, and that is being there in person. It's almost the next best thing, right? They may be people who invest in VR, granted, when it's cheaper, but they're still going to make sure that, VR sells. And right now, we need it to sell. The games are going to come. They may not buy those, but they may buy the apps and maintain a demand for a lot of machines being out there for a long time to come. So that's the way I see it. So when I see stuff like the VR travel apps, which I'm going to link, by the way, and you can go to them, and there's all kinds of cool stuff. Some of the sites have demos that you can check out, and you could pop into the Louvre or check out the Colosseum in Rome, that kind of stuff. So pretty damn cool. Or the terracotta army in China. Or the one that I enjoy, the Dutch harbor town in Japan that was created specifically for the Dutch because they were the only nation that Japan allowed to trade with them for 200 plus years, right? All that kind of stuff. Awesome. So even if you're not in it, check it out. You might know somebody in your family who it may excite, right? And kind of like shopping, it can give you an idea as well of what to expect that static pictures can't show you, right? Now, the last thing I want to talk about has to do with haptic gloves. And haptic gloves are basically touch sensitive. And it was a conversation I was having with Xlord B, I believe on the last video. And he showed me a website, he linked to me, GloveoneVR. They basically have gloves that are slender on fingers, they're not big and bulky, and yet they provide haptic feedback. Haptic just means sensation of touch, right? Anything that delivers sensation of touch. So small vibrations, pressure, that type of thing. His concept, take it a step further, make it with, some kind of piston design where when you grab on something, your grip physically can't go further in to just enhance that feeling of holding an object, right? So check that out. It's just one of those things that, imagine you free up your hands. Instead of hands being for Vive controllers, you still may have a controller in one hand, but you've got your actual hands able to do stuff, which is cool. Hold a gun, right? And they track the finger on it, all that kind of stuff. Just mad potential. Can't wait. Check that out. I will cut it short here, guys. I want to get to some gaming stuff. As always, till the next time, cheers.